Hi everyone, welcome to Being Real, another episode 7. Today we are talking about unequally yoked. This is a very interesting topic that we will be talking about this evening. The reason I'm saying is interesting, I'm not sure if I should say interesting, but perhaps controversial because we have different perspectives about the topic. And this evening I have a panel of friends. We are just peers here trying to figure out or rather to tackle this topic, and we will they will be sharing their perspective on the issue. And we have Abel Mupedziswa. He's in Zimbabwe. Abel, can you just say hi to the people? If you want to say, tell them anything about you in brief, you can say, so that they can know who will be sharing a perspective about Unequally Yoked.
All right. Hello, everyone. This is Abel Mupedziswa from Zimbabwe. I'm so pleased to be part of this panel discussing this, like you rightly said, controversial, yet very critical subject. It is my prayer and hope that we will be able to share ideas and to be able to help each other so that by the time we leave this place, we will be better positioned to handle such issues and better positioned to even counsel others and being able to help others. For now, that's all I can say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abel. We also have Nomsa Muhuma. I'm still trying to get used to the surname, you know. It's been Nomsa Malambo all the way, but anyway, yeah.
We have not alone.
You know, she's
not alone.
She's in Zambia. Nomsa, just say hi to the people.
Hi, I still actually introduce myself as Malambo, so you're not alone. Getting used to the surname. But yeah, happy to join the conversation. Yeah, as April said.
Okay, thank you so much for having accepted the invitation. We also have Brenda. Brenda is in Kenya. Say something to the people, Brenda.
Hi everyone, we are so glad you could join us, and I'm looking forward to learning from everyone as we grow together. Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, Brenda. And we also have Mbusi. Mbusi is in Botswana. It's your time to say hi to the people.
Hello guys, how are you doing? Thanks for having me. Looking forward to tackling this issue.
Awesome. So we've done our introductions. I mean, you know me. I think that by now people know me. I'm Lesego. I'm one of the hosts of Being Real, where we just have casual chats with peers. As I was saying earlier on, we're trying just to figure out this life, and none of us here is an expert. So I pray and hope that we're going to gain something that will help us in this journey called life. So let's get into the chat. Let's get into the conversation. I think the first question that to lay a foundation regarding this conversation would be for me, what do we mean by being unequally yoked? Like it's a very big word, unequally yoked. To a layman, what is that, and what is this principle? If it's a principle, I'm assuming it's a principle. You will correct me. What is this principle based on of unequally yoked? I will want to start with Mbusi. Mbusi, what are your thoughts on this?
Okay, so do not be unequally yoked. Maybe just to give this a bit of context, is coming from the famous and popular verse, 2 Corinthians 6, verse 14, okay, which says, do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. For what partnership has righteousness with lawlessness? Or what fellowship hath light with darkness? So for us to understand what I think is being referred to here is the keyword, the two keywords are unequally and yoked. And I'll choose to start with yoked. So yoked basically comes from the word yoke, okay? Which is that wooden thing that is put on cattle as a farmer puts them together in pairs so that they can use them in the plowing field, okay? So now the yoke has a horizontal plane or a pillar or a horizontal part, and then it has vertical parts which keep the cattle in line and moving in one direction. And unequally suggests that if these cattle are unequally yoked, there is an imbalance. There is either an imbalance of height and the plane at the horizontal one at the top of their necks is not properly aligned. It results in the other shorter cow dragging possibly and being inefficient in pulling the plow in the field from one point to another. So the farmer's goal is simple. He's simply saying, okay, there's something which has to be done in front of me. I need to plow. I'm going to put the yoke on the cattle. For me to achieve my goal and get to the end, these cattle have to pull together, or it's donkeys, whatever it is that you use. They need to pull together. And for there to be progress, there shouldn't be an imbalance. They must be of the same strength. You know, they must be chastened in such a way that they move together well. There's not one cow which can move in front of the other while the other remains behind. So it's science. It's the science of farming, as it were, if I can put it that way.
Okay.
And to give it context now to our conversation today, it seeks to suggest that when it comes to relationships, this is one of the scriptures which is being used to give advice before people get married, to say, do not be unequally yoked with an unbeliever. Okay? Because there can be disharmony in the goal of marriage or the marriage institution. You will have a difficulty moving from point A to B. And typically, when these cattle, in this case being people, are unequally yoked, it can fatigue the one who wants to move forward. And when the other wants to move forward or the other wants to rest, the other person is moving in a different direction. There is chaos such that the plow will not move. And it is implied that when this plow doesn't move, it results in a failed marriage, or we can call it divorce. I believe it's a failed marriage if people are not satisfied when they're in the marriage, when they're just living beneath their potential and say, you know what, I'm married, I'm just going to die with this. So the marriage is not achieving its goal. That is unequal yoking.
Okay. Okay. Mbusi is bringing some interesting points there, perspective. So what I'm getting from him is saying, now in the relationship context, there's a need for people to be in sync. This is what I'm getting from him. But let's stretch it further. I just want to hear the rest of the guys. What do you think? Nomsa, what are your thoughts? I don't know if you want to add, you want to subtract, you want to expand, whatever it is. Yeah, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think for me it's, and thank you, Mozi, for the spiritual context. I think for me it starts there and then it kind of broadens out into the other issues of life. So when thinking about what it means to be unequally yoked, yes, there's, I'm a believer, are you a believer? I'm this denomination, are you this denomination? But there's also kind of the founding principles that guide the way we live our lives as people. Maybe how I deal with conflict. How do I treat my family? How do I deal with what's my working pattern? What's my parenting style? Just the founding principles of how we live life. And I think for me, it starts in the spiritual context, but it expands into all of those things to say, if even within my spiritual circles, do we view life the same? Do we view, let's say, parenting the same? How do you deal with success? How do you deal with disappointment? If I do something that upsets you and we're in a relationship context, are you the kind of person who just shuts down and doesn't talk? Or are you the kind of person who chooses to talk it out and communicate and work things out? For me, you can be unequally yoked even in those contexts where, and that can breed frustration in a relationship. So for me, it starts with the spiritual, but it expands into the general views of how we live life. Do we gel? Are we in sync, like you were saying, Musi and Les?
I like that you bringing a very nice perspective there, that it does not end on a spiritual level, but it touches on every aspect of our lives. The people that are around you, what are their values, their moral standing and stuff? Are we on the same page? Okay. Yes, that's what you're saying. Yeah. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Brenda, do you want to add?
Yes, I'd like to add something. I like the way it's gone so far and how it's built from Bosi to Nomsa. And just adding to the same, every time we talk about this being unequally yoked, of course, all of us are drawn to the verse in Corinthians that heeds us not to be unequally yoked with non-believers. And for me, what strikes me there, particularly thinking on the verse, is the questions that follow thereafter. What does righteousness have to do with wickedness? And what communion can light have with darkness? Like, it goes further to expound on what the unequally yoked is. And I like what both the other panelists have said, but let me just also add another thought to that all, is that as we're talking about unequally yoked and thinking about non-believers, and building especially on what Nomsa said, it's also possible to be unequally yoked and you're both in church.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think we'll expound on that further, but it's possible to still be unequally yoked. And for me, how I'd describe being unequally yoked is trying to bring opposites together. Because even the contrast that is being built in the verse in the Bible, it's like light and darkness. Then you have wickedness and righteousness. Like, it's two extreme opposites, trying to bring two extreme opposites together. And that's how I describe unequally yoked as to a layman.
Okay, I hear you. Let me. I want to hold that thought of can two people be in the same denomination and still be unequally yoked? Yeah. Just want to hold that thought. It's a very important one. We'll tackle it later. Okay, I see Mbusi wants to say something, but before that, I just want to give Abel a chance to just say his thoughts on this question.
Thank you, Leslie. I would say a lot has been said so far on this question, and I'm in total agreement with with everything that has been said so far. But I just wanted to say maybe one thing that could help us also as we discuss this question is to clarify on what an unbeliever is. I think if we can have clarity on that, that will help us as we then tackle other questions. Thank you.
Oh, okay. All right. You guys are bringing questions. Let's get into those questions. Okay, before we get to that, Mbusi, please say your thoughts.
Okay, thank you. Nomsa, I liked the points that you made, okay? Because this verse seems to make it stick to the spiritual part, and it's what Abel is actually leading us to. But it's all these elements, I would say it's belief systems, and belief systems vary in nature. What do you believe about money? What do you believe about children? Things such as homeschooling, private schools, government school, all those are sources of contention, which I've come to realize that they are the fundamental differences which are at thorn in the flesh for most people. So yeah, I actually wanted to appreciate that comment.
Okay.
But best develops, I was actually going to where Abel is going, that it's what I struggle with a lot. Hey, what does righteousness have with darkness? Or what is an unbeliever in the context of this verse? I think if we answer that, we're on the right course to actually then applying it appropriately to relationships. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, you guys are going somewhere, and I like where we are going. So, but I don't know if you guys answered my question on I've heard you say, but I'm not sure if you've answered. What is this principle of unequally yoked is? Where is it based? Yeah, which principle is where is it based? Where are we basing it from? I just want a clear one to say this is where we are basing it from, so that you're on the same page.
I'd say that every time we talk about unequally yoked, it's always in reference to that Bible verse. So most of the directions, most of the conversations around being unequally yoked are directed from that particular verse, where it refers to believers and unbelievers.
All right. Okay, thank you for that. I just don't know what. I'm sorry.
I think I'd also add, I think Mbusi touched on this in his comment, but in the agricultural context, is if you have, two work horses or two oxen or two whatever's pulling a load, essentially in life we are all on a journey, and in that journey we all have a load or a burden or whatever it is that we have on our shoulders. And for me, the principle of unequally yoked is one is pulling, one is not. Kind of what Brenda had touched on in the beginning of opposites is that there's no balance. And it's you see it most in the spiritual context, where then the questions ask, what fellowship does righteousness have with unrighteousness, or light with darkness? But essentially there's that lack of balance in terms of whether it is a load or a weight, or a task or a purpose, however you choose to view it. But there's that lack of balance between two what's the word? Is it aspects, people? Because we're speaking about it in the context of relationships. But yeah, that's how I see it.
All right. So let's get into this issue of an unbeliever. What do we mean about a person is an unbeliever? What is that? Where's that concept even coming from? Where's that concept coming from? I think that's a good one. Mbusi, you want to go first?
Yes. You see, this issue of unbeliever, for this theme to have its proper context, I know I've given the agricultural practicalities. Let's agree that the heart of this issue lies in the second part of the verse of being an unbeliever. Because if we're being told, marry someone who has the same values with you as dieting, exercise, sleeping patterns, running a business and being a stay-at-home mom, there wouldn't be an issue to talk about. I don't know if you want to agree with me on that. There wouldn't be an issue because I am simply going to pick a person who I perceive to have those similarities with me, and I say, this is equal yoking, which would then suppose that that person is a believer. This issue is a problem because we are actually not talking primarily about other aspects of compatibility or other belief systems or values between couples. It talks solely about the spiritual one. Okay? And developed it even further and say an unbeliever, we've developed this system of unbelievers in silos to say, if you go to this church, and a believer has to be someone within your church. Right. So that's where the issue is. And I want us to go there, that this conversation will by and large be talking about, should I marry someone from the same denomination or with the same spiritual beliefs as I have? Other issues are seemingly completely irrelevant. Because then there wouldn't be a source of contention. I just choose based on my level of knowledge. But here we are sort of like being given a standard to say there's people who believe and there's those who do not believe. And to answer the last part of your question, an unbeliever, during these times when Paul was writing, this is going to be the last spiritual thing I talk about. I just do it for but there was a time when everyone rebuked Jesus. They're saying, listen, who is this man? He eats with sinners and whatnot. During the times of Jesus and Paul, there was a clear demarcation between, your Jews and Gentiles. A clear line was drawn between infidels and people who were the custodians of the gospel or the right belief system.
Okay.
So right now, I would say an unbeliever today is someone who has not yet accepted the gospel.
Not yet the gospel.
Not yet accepted the gospel. They don't even, maybe they may know it and just appreciate it from afar, but they haven't accepted, internalized, and they are not a practicing Christian. Practicing Christian, in the sense of following the precepts, praying the word, convocating by attending church. I don't want to say that it has to be the same church or not, because that's the hot potato. So I would say it's someone who is not a practicing Christian.
So let me try to understand you. You're saying an unbeliever, it's someone who is not a Christian, or is a Christian, but they don't have an experience with God. Like they have not experienced the gospel in their lives. Is it what you're saying? Make it simple for us.
Let me give it to you. I don't want to say directly, because you see, if I say someone is a practicing Christian, I risk being standing on the moral high ground of saying, okay, I'm looking at that, I'm a practicing Christian, I pray 4 or 5 times a week, I read the word, I fast. Therefore, according to my standard, you are not a practicing Christian. You get me? So I would say it's who has to have that same value system as me. If I don't pray, but I've accepted Christ, and I find another person who doesn't pray, but has accepted Christ, we are unequally yoked. It is a yoke of weaklings, however. Do you understand? It's a yoke of weaklings. We have the same value system. We both believe fasting is not important. We believe we can pray when we feel like. We believe we can go to church when it feels like. But one thing we have in common is that we believe in the gospel, we believe in God. That then becomes equal yoking. But the plow is basically being pulled by young calves. And that itself will...
I hear you. But we'll go deeper on that one. That one.
Can I just ask a question?
Brenda?
Can I ask a question?
Okay, yes, we can.
No. Just building on trying to define who a believer is. And we're talking about, since when we're talking about believer and unbeliever, it's based it's on a spiritual basis, based on the Bible. Yeah. At this point, when we're talking about believer and unbeliever, it's based on the Bible. And when we're trying to bring it up and saying it's a yoking of weaklings, yes, using it lightly. Wait, my question has disappeared, but let me just add and say it's basically just, it could be 2 Christians who are not on the same page. Is that what you're saying, Mbusi?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Because who are not on the same page.
Yes, because you see, if we're in a relationship where we both know that Jesus is important, God, there's heaven, but we feel like we're not going to pray today, and we sleep, we don't have a conflict. You get me? We are like the oxen. We are deciding to pull one step, as and when we feel like. So we are not in conflict. But that's not how we should be doing it, because you'll find out the Bible says, pray without ceasing. Meditate on the word day and night. So the people who are meditating day and night, who are praying and are meeting the requirements of Scripture, are the strong oxen, which can carry the marriage union. They can get on the plow and pull it better, as opposed to similarly compatible people who believe very little and do very little. They will experience their own set of challenges, which arise from not believing in the word fully. So I was using the word weaklings figuratively, that you need to be mature enough to be in a good relationship or marital union. You need to be the oxen. Ideally, in the plow, you put oxen. But the calves can also be put, because they can pull, if they're equally yoked and they follow the same instructions and they're moving at the same pace. But then they will not dig that deep, because they are generally weak and will move at a very slow pace. But they are compatible, because none is moving ahead of the other, none is frustrating the other.
And they're
Okay.
equally yoked.
They're
Yeah,
equally
equally
yoked. Okay. Namsa, do you want to say, do you want to add? What are your thoughts?
Sure. I'm still trying to digest what Musi was saying. But yeah, it's true. And I think the emphasis is definitely on, for me, I keep viewing it holistically, because even when the Bible talks about being a believer, my being a believer will affect my worldview, right? My belief in Christ, my belief that he is my savior, my belief that he is coming again soon. All of those things will affect the way in which I live my life. So if I meet a believer, for instance, who will attend church, who will outwardly present what looks like a good Christian life, but mismanages their finances, for me, that's an unequal yoking. And for me, that questions their stance. For me, that questions their stance as a believer, because as a believer, I have a responsibility towards managing well that which God has given me. If I meet someone who, I don't know what example to use, but essentially the term believer there, because it's a belief in Christ, it's a belief in the principles that he stood for. All of those things will affect the way in which I live my life and the way in which I choose to live my life. Personality and compatibility aside, there's certain guiding principles of life that are found in Christianity and in belief in Christ. And because of that, you can be in the same spaces, you can be in the same churches and be unequally yoked. And you can carry the term believer, but be unequally yoked.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Hey, you guys are deep. You're confusing me.
No, I actually want to support that answer. It's it's a brilliant answer, because
Yeah.
I borrow from what Nomsa is saying. An unbeliever is someone who does not have a similar worldview, and this presupposes one thing, because when this thing zones into the spiritual aspect, it's Paul actually speaking from experience, and it's marriage counselor speaking from experience to say your Christian values or your belief system is so fundamental that it will affect everything around you. An example she's giving of finance is one of finance. Let's look at disciplining children. If I go to Proverbs, says, spare the rod, spoil the child. But if I come on someone, who's people who've lived, let's say in America, who are of the worldview that spanking children is abuse, and that my child can report me. If I have someone who entertains those values, I'm in trouble. We are completely unequally yoked. So I get the sense that an unbeliever is someone who doesn't have your profound and cherished worldview, especially from a spiritual perspective, because out of what you grasp spiritually comes the lens through which you view all the areas of your life: finance, friendships, career, the level at which you pursue wealth. It all comes down to this one thing of how you've accepted your worldview from a Christian context.
Okay, I hear you. Okay, let me give Abel a chance. Then I'll say what I need to say. Abel?
Okay, thank you, Leslie. I like the way the discussion is going. Actually, it's actually touching some of the issues that I wanted to raise. Generally, when people talk of unbelievers, we are quick to think of maybe someone who is an atheist, someone who doesn't know God or doesn't have anything to do with God. And at times, some may take it to a point of maybe looking at people of a different religion, different denomination, simply because we've got different doctrines, principles, and values. But I'm glad we are bringing it closer home to say, even in the same denomination, even if we have the same faith, the same doctrine, and the same teachings, there comes a time when you find yourself with someone who doesn't uphold what they claim to believe in. automatically that would be a situation where one would be unequally yoked. But at the end of the day, it's not about just having two people with baptismal certificates who attend church on Sabbath every Sabbath, but it goes beyond just prophesying and just talking about it. It then involves how people then live, how people then uphold those values and all the things that they claim to believe in. At the end of the day, that then separates who is a believer and who is not a believer. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Abel. Thank you. So what I'm getting from you guys is that at the core of being yoked, equally yoked, it's principle based, it's values, your morals, the foundation of it, and all of these things will give birth to what Nomsa was saying, that the general aspects of our lives what the balance or the being in sync will be manifested in the general aspects of our lives. So our principles, values, and morals, and whatever that you can think of, which needs to be our foundation, needs to be equally yoked, if I would put it that way. But I want to tap into what Umbusi was saying earlier on. I want us to be. We're putting it. I know we want to be safe and whatnot, but I just want us to be clear. Let's put it out there. So someone who is, I'm saying it on purpose, but I want us to be clear. No, I don't want us to speak in parables, I want us to be clear. So someone from another denomination, is that person a believer or an unbeliever? Anyone can shoot. Anyone can say what are the thoughts on this one. Someone from Pentecostal is interested in this person from Pentecostal church and stuff. Is that person an unbeliever in this case, in our context?
I'd say depending on their Christian work. There's something that we had said about a practicing Christian, yeah? And it's different being a nominal Christian, like you're just a Christian because I'm a Christian, I was born in a Christian home, but are you practicing? And it's possible that this person in the Pentecostal church is actually a believer. It's very possible. So depending on their Christian work, it's possible that they could be a believer or could not be a believer.
Hey, Brenda, I hear you. I hear Brenda. Do you guys hear Brenda? So Brenda is saying that someone who's not in the same denomination as her or as me can be considered a believer if they are practicing Christians. For me, I want to say, when I say a Christian, someone who has an experience with God, who knows his God, and stuff. For me, it makes sense in that sense. So Brenda's saying someone like that is a believer and stuff. But earlier on, you guys mentioned the issue of principle, of values and stuff. So someone from the other denomination and me in the other denomination, do you think that our principles are in sync and in some way or the other? I hope you get what I'm trying to say.
For me, the term believer is based on what you believe, right? So for me, in my denomination, there are a set of principles that I believe. So someone else in a different denomination has their set of principles that they believe, and they will be a believer in their denomination. But in my denomination and in my worldview, they will not be a believer because they will not believe the set of principles that I believe. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't have a walk with Christ, that they don't know Christ. It's just, I believe this and they believe that. Because those two things are not the same, to put it plainly, from the way from where I see it, they are not a believer. Merely because the term believer is based on that which you believe, right? So if I believe A and you believe B, those two things are not the same. But that doesn't discount anybody's walk with Christ. It doesn't discount anybody's personal experience with Christ, right? In what's that verse that I'm trying to remember? Other sheep have I that are not of this fold. It is not of us to determine, who has a walk with Christ and who doesn't. But if we're putting it bluntly based on just belief in a set of values, in a set of principles, from that perspective, then across two different denominations, it doesn't translate.
Okay. I like what she's saying. And Abel, what are your thoughts? What you're saying?
Okay.
Abel?
Thank you. Hello. Yes. Yeah, this is getting quite interesting. I'm looking at it from a perspective where you have someone like the other speakers were saying, who have got a different set of beliefs. Now, my understanding is for one to be called a Christian, they must be walking as Christ walked. They must be doing things the way Christ would want things to be done. They must be doing things God would command, right? So I'm thinking someone from another denomination, I'm not qualified to call them evil or to call them a bad person, but the way I'm taking it, maybe you're looking at someone who is in the church which completely disregards the Bible or some portions of the Bible. I know there are some churches which say the Old Testament is an old covenant, it's already in the past, but nothing to do with it. You will notice that that person might actually be, I would say in quotes, a fervent Christian, yet there are certain things that they are not yet enlightened in. So at the end of the day, simply because they are not yet there, if we are now taking a Christian who knows all these truths, it will be improper for them to then get yoked with such a person. At best, we can then only pray for that person and maybe try and help them to get to the level or to have the light that they ought to have. Otherwise, at the point at which they are not yet believing in what God wants to be believed in, at the point when they are not yet practicing what God expects them to be practicing, at that point, we can safely call them an unbeliever, but not because they are evil, but simply because they haven't gotten to that level. And for an example, to then say an SDA then gets married to such a person, well, I would say that automatically becomes an equal yoking because you are starting from a different footing altogether.
Okay. Okay, let me wait. Let me hear what Mbuzi has to say. Because I'm hearing something different from Abel. Yeah, he's saying something different, and Nomsa said something different. So just want to hear what Mbuzi, what are his thoughts on this before I say my thoughts.
All right. I liked what Nomsa said, that you see this from your perspective, according to your belief system. I want to go even further than that and say, I will see and deal with the situation on the ground when I'm in it. I'm single, I'm not married, and I'm hoping to meet someone, if I can just put it out there. So I want to be very frank and honest and say, this is what I would do. So I have a set of values which I believe in, and I believe there are other people in other churches who believe in those values. And that, unfortunately, sometimes you can be in the wrong denomination, which is a different preaching philosophy. We know that you'll hear people saying these certain churches are preaching the prosperity gospel, certain churches are preaching, you can prophesy. So every church is a certain philosophy. But there is the core essence of what makes up a Christian, which is their love for the word and listening to what God says, prayer and communion with God, service, and even fellowshipping with brethren. I would put these as my top 4. Honestly speaking, if I find you from another denomination and you fervently believe and uphold these 4, and as we are getting to know each other, we are going to meet the following issues. You have different issues about whether you should smoke or drink. Some people will tell you Jesus' miracle was to convert wine. So God, if he started with this, surely God must have blessed the wine. You'll find people coming up with such arguments. That should relationships be monogamous or polygamous? That's another issue which would come out depending on these value systems. Should we eat certain food or not? Should we go to certain places? Those are things which they need to be answered by the value system. And I would decide that, would this work based on, if you ask me that, no, but why do you guys do this? And say, look, according to the word, this is what I've studied and this is what I've learned. And that person could believe. That person could pull up to the next level if they are a fervent believer in the word. And by so doing, sometimes some marriages today actually came from 2 people who were not equally yoked, but there was that sharing, there was that platform to give each other an opportunity to explore religious issues at the level of religious practice. And it moved one person to the other denomination. So some people can discover that actually my denomination is wrong about something. The day of worship is no longer Sunday, it's Saturday, they move. Someone will say, oh, okay, the Old Testament is gone, so I'm moving to Sunday. Bottom line is, whether you go to Sunday or you go to Saturday, so long as the yoke is equal, you will be compatible, even at your level of lack of knowledge. The reason why I'm saying this is, it's important that, okay, we see this as a religious thing, right? But guys, I want to be very honest. I have seen people who are not practicing Christians, who went to church to get their marriage, done there, they signed, there was a church service and everything. They've been married for 40 to 50 years. Which then confuses me at times, because I then think and say, listen, other people who don't even believe at all have successful marriages. This man loves his wife, then it doesn't seem like he's doing anything. And then I start having a sore heart, because I'm saying, I'm always cracking myself with these criteria, trying to see, is this person a believer or not? Whereas I'm just simply looking for love. And at times you can find someone who loves you and they're like, you know what, this whole yoking thing and religion, I'm going to put it aside, which is where our struggle really is. It's a difficult judgment to actually make, whether someone is in church or outside, to say, I think me and this person would actually get along. We don't have the spiritual eyes for that. You get me? So his experiences taught me that learn how to look for the essence within a person, which is their level of practice. Observe them from afar. Are they a diligent church attender? Do they pray? Do they say this or that? Do they share? By their fruits you shall know them. You look at the subtle things and say, but I'm also this person. And believe me, the fact that that person is that which you are automatically attracts you to them. And sometimes with this attraction and that fellowship, to say, listen, I've really found a special person who the other person also sees that we believe same thing. But when you get to the dinner table, one is ordering wine, one is ordering water. If you really are interested in each other and know that you believe in the same values, you would say, hey, but so how do you feel about this thing? You will talk about it. And bottom line is, one of you will be swayed, hopefully the one in the place of darkness or lack of knowledge, to the light, and not the other way around.
Okay. So let me just ask this question. Would you guys, okay, Nomsa is married, guys, so this might not be really a relevant question to her. She's married, but to those who are not married, from what Mbusi is saying, I'm trying to understand so that we be clear. Would you date someone from another denomination? Would you, Mbusi, I'm coming back to you because you've been highlighting certain things there. So would you date someone from another denomination with whatever that you've highlighted?
Yes, I'll say it verbatim. I would date someone from another denomination, provided I see that the spirituality and all these other things are completely aligned. And I would probe. I would know that if I believe that I have the spiritual high ground to want to move them away from a certain position, I would let that be my problem with Christ's help. But honestly speaking, I would. I have considered it. I have done it. It hasn't turned out well, but actually those were, yeah, trust me, it doesn't turn out well. It has its disadvantages. But in hindsight, when I look at it, I say, you know what? These were actually some of the best relationships that I've had. 2 of them, they were very amazing. So honestly speaking, I would.
Mbusi would date someone from another denomination. Abel, what are your thoughts?
Well, in my case, unfortunately, I wouldn't. Yes, I would say the fact that we are starting from a point where we see certain things in a different manner. Well, I feel it's not a safe place to start from. If it's a case where someone has been in another denomination, for some reason they get to have the light, we are now having the same belief system. Well, that's a different story I would consider. But if it's a case where maybe someone is a Sunday worshiper, the issue of the Sabbath is very clearly spelled out, right? And someone, well, for some reason, maybe they haven't gotten that light. I would say one of the teachings that I've gotten is that marriage or relationships are not an evangelism tool. That's something that I managed to really get very clear. But if it's about evangelism, there's nothing wrong. I can go to any church and to any lady from any church and minister to them. But to then say I'll use that as a tool and having assessed them and say they're at the right spiritual level. Well, for me, I think, and up until maybe we get to a point where we have got the same values and same principles, I feel it won't be a safe thing for me to do.
Okay, that's very interesting.
Maybe if I can just share, I've got a cousin of mine, she's way older than me. Well, I remember we were very young when she was dating some guy, and the guy was from another denomination, and that cousin of mine was very clear that, look, I wouldn't date a guy from another denomination. This is it. I believe in the Sabbath. I've got these issues that I consider that you guys do not consider. And the guy was very simple and straightforward. And he was like, okay, that's not a problem with me. I've actually been admiring Adventism. The guy joined the church and we pulled a good maybe 6 months or so with him. Soon after marriage, it was now Sabbath in, 2 Sabbaths out, another in, 3 Sabbaths out. A couple of months, I think 6 months to 9 months down the line, the guy was no longer coming to church. And that cousin of us continued coming to church until it got to such a point when the husband then clearly spelled out that, look, you are my wife and I call the shots in this home. You are no longer going to Adventism. Yes, initially she would sneak out, but eventually she was pulled away from the faith. And she's now, I would say, somewhere no one ever thought she would be. Because I don't know whether it's a case of her having switched off her conscience, but she's now a very fervent believer of even some of the strangest doctrines under the sun. I thought maybe I could just share that as a testimony.
Okay, that's an interesting one there. But okay, Brenda, what are your thoughts on dating someone from another denomination?
Thanks, Les. I also like the testimony that Abel has shared. I'm just wondering, before he talked about the strange doctrines, I was going to ask, is she still a believer even if she's now married to someone else who's not of the same denomination? But that's just food for thought. For me, I really would. And here is why. Many times, myself included, and up until very recently, I found that I tend to hide a lot of things behind my denomination. Like I'd say, you meet someone and you're telling yourself, they belong to my church. So in your mind, you're already thinking that they should be a certain kind of way. As long as he goes to this church, then he ticks all the boxes that I am looking for. He's a loving man, he's a kind man, he's patient. And that's not always the case. I I have, and that's not saying that I have met people in everyone in my denomination is not a good fit for me. I still don't know that until I'm married like Nomsa. But I have met people in other denominations who are wonderful people, even better than people I have dated in church. It's a sad reality. I have, and perhaps even the same can be said of me. There are people who've met me in church and maybe I wasn't what they expected because, again, we hid it behind being of this particular church. So I definitely would. The questions I would ask myself when considering dating or even eventually marrying someone would be, how is this person, as in what's their character? Yeah. Because their character would be built on what they believe in. Like we said, your Christian walk, you're not just going to be a Christian for yourself. It will radiate in everything that you're doing, your finances, your associations. Like your Christian walk will radiate in all those avenues of your life. So for me, I'd ask myself, are they, like, in their character, do they represent Christ? Yeah. Do they love Christ? Are they walking with Christ? What's their Christian walk like? I'd consider that before I get to the question of asking, what denomination does this person belong to? So for me, it would be a yes. I'd first consider their Christian walk, and if it radiates, like their Christian walk, does it show in what they're doing? Like, are they practicing Christians or just nominal Christians? Okay.
I like what you guys have said. Namsa, you want to say something?
I want to hear what you think, Les.
I'm getting into it. For me personally, someone will say to me, I'm gonna use the story of Hosea, and someone will say, but that was not the context. I get it. We know that God says to Hosea, go and marry a prostitute and stuff. But the context is about Israel. That was adulterers and stuff regarding their spiritual well-being. And God was not happy with that. So he was just trying to teach a lesson. But for me, there's a principle there that I shouldn't limit God on how God needs to work in my life. If God will say to me that this person is for you. I'm saying God, I'm not saying me. I'm going to make the decision to say I'm moving forward in this relationship. If I look at this person and they have these values and whatnot, sometimes the person can have all these, what Mbusi was saying, the character and whatever, and I see that we are in sync and stuff. But you don't know how will life be in 10 years' time. Person can change and stuff. But then when God says, let's say, move forward, take a step into this relationship, I will go for it. But I will not do it on my own choice and whatnot. I will allow God to lead me into this relationship. So in essence, I'm saying I would date a nun, someone who's not in the same denomination as me, but only when God is leading. Other than that, I wouldn't go forward. So that's where I'm standing. Perhaps then going deeper into it or further, I would then let's explore the couples that have made it. A lot of couples that have made it. I had Abel was more inclined to, he wouldn't, and I respect what he said. But there are people in the church, particularly our church, who have made it. You find that the husband was not of this denomination, and he comes into this denomination because of marriage, and later on, the guy becomes this, strong in his Christian journey, or the other way around, is a woman and whatnot. And for me, it goes back to limiting God and stuff. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on the couples that have made it in the church? I think I'm directing it to you, Abel, because you are more inclined to the saying you want. What about those who have made it?
Okay, thank you. Well, I think I would want to make one or two disclaimers. The first one being that just because you marry someone from the same church, it doesn't mean you are equally yoked, like we highlighted earlier. You may marry someone who knows all the doctrines, who knows all the principles, right? Yet has got absolute disregard of such. So there are some people whom we think they were equally yoked simply because they married an elder or a deacon in church, yet they married a wrong guy. So we need to be clear on that. I'm sure we know that there are some guys within our church who drink, who smoke, who go clubbing, who do all sorts of things, right? So it will not be safe to simply say just because someone got married to another SDA, then they are equally yoked. Now, I would need to point out also that there are some people whom we could say they were properly equally yoked, right? And we're talking of unions that were really approved by God. Think of people like, I would talk of people like Isaac and Rebecca. We know very well that God was leading the entire process, right? But these guys, they had their own challenges. I'm sure we do realize that they spent a good 20 years without a kid, right? But simply because they were of the same faith and they were equally yoked, they were prayerful about it, they were patient, and they waited until God rewarded them. Now, when you're with someone with a different faith, probably they will think, I can't wait for that long. They'll end up doing other things, right? But if it's someone who is grounded in the word, who knows that you ought to be married to one partner, if they can uphold that principle, then you know such a marriage will be able to stand. I would like to talk about another couple that we all know about, Adam and Eve. Yes, they were properly married. They were married, I mean, a marriage made by God himself. But you know that they led each other astray and their kids ended up killing each other. So you notice that you may be equally married. I mean, you may be equally yoked, yet there can still be some challenges. But at the end of the day, when people are properly equally yoked, you know that whatever challenges that you will face, simply because you've done the right thing, God will always be on your side. And whatever challenges you will face, you will be able to overcome them through God's leading and through God's guidance. So, but I just wanted to highlight again that being equally yoked is no guarantee that things will always be smooth. As I indicated, those few examples that I gave, you can actually see that things were not always rosy, but in the end, they were able to stand.
Okay.
Yeah.
I hear.
I think, sorry, go ahead.
No, you can go ahead, Nomsa.
I think for me, one of the biggest lessons of my short life is that grace is a very real thing. And as a human, I can neither tell where grace begins nor where it ends. And only God can. And I think one of the stories that for me from the Bible speaks very much to my personal life is the story of Esther. Because Esther is found in a place where, truth be told, you wouldn't expect to find a young Christian woman married to, or a young Jewish girl married to a heathen king. You wouldn't expect to see that. You wouldn't expect to aspire to that. And yet, through her story, you have the salvation of Israel within that context and within that time. And her uncle even tells her, you know, who knows if you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this. And that's through, for all intents and purposes, a king who would be considered heathen. If you know the story of hey, why is his name leaving my mind now? Mom brain, sorry, I can't remember his name. But basically, for me, that says that grace is a very real thing. And when you're talking about, you know, the couples who to the naked eye would look unequally yoked, but have made it. For me, that speaks to the capacity of grace. I think going back to what you were saying about not limiting God, you can't limit grace. At the same time, people, one of the things Mom, and a lot of people say this, is that people will not always tell you who they are, but they will always show you. So even within, our own denominations or other denominations, someone can profess one thing with their mouth, but if you pay attention closely to their lives, to the way they approach life, they will always show you who they are. And ultimately, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years down the line, the person that you're going to be dealing with isn't the person who they say they are, it's who they are, the substance of who they are. And, someone can profess to say, I pay a faithful tithe. I, believe in, because this is what I believe in the 7th-day Sabbath. I believe in XYZ. But ultimately, the way in which they live their life will show the substance of who they are. And I think what I'm hearing from everyone is it is more important to decipher the substance of who someone is, number one. And number two, to follow God's leading, because we can, with our own naked eye, we cannot discern where grace begins and where grace ends. But the other thing that I want to share is something that's always stuck with me, is something that one of my mentors said years back, that truth appeals to the honest mind. Ultimately, when someone approaches life honestly, when they come across truth, they will always be willing to follow it, regardless of which denomination they're found in or where in the sphere of life they're found. But when an honestly mistaken person comes across truth and doesn't change their mistake, they either cease to be honest or they cease to be mistaken. Wait, no, I didn't say that right. The phrase is, when an honestly mistaken person comes across truth, they will either cease to be mistaken or they will cease to be honest. So that goes back to truth appealing to the honest mind. If I approach life honestly, right, and I am shown a certain truth that highlights an error in my life, if I do not fix that error in my life, then I do not approach life honestly. If, however, I do fix that error in my life, then I am no longer mistaken. So ultimately, it comes down to the willingness of a person to absorb, for the lack of a better term, truth, right? And this applies even in the context of a relationship. No two people approach life the same. So even when we talk about equal yokeness or compatibility, the truth of the matter is no two people will approach life the same. But it boils down to someone being willing to approach life a different way if they are presented with a different way to approach life. A quick example, and then I'll shut up. A friend of mine this past week shared with me this example, that in life, essentially, everybody is on a journey. Everybody is headed somewhere. And everybody is on a different mode of transport. Some are using, high-speed trains. Some are using planes. Some are using canoes. Some are using bicycles. Some are using SUVs. But we are all headed somewhere. Now, if I meet with someone who is headed my direction, and I am in an SUV, and they are pedaling a bicycle, but we are headed in the same direction. And I present to this person that, look, you know what, with the bicycle, you'll still reach where you are, but one, you'll be extremely tired, and two, it'll take you very long. How about you hop into my SUV? And that person is willing to hop into my SUV, and we're both headed the same direction. That can make for a smooth life, right? If, however, this person says, I am happy with my bicycle, I will still reach where I'm going, even if it is not the most efficient mode of transport, then if I choose to enter that person's bicycle, there will be friction the whole way, because in my mind, I will always know that there's a more efficient way to do this, even though we are headed in the same direction, even though we believe, there's our destination and that's where we're trying to get to. So I think ultimately for me, what I'm taking away from everyone, from what I've heard from everyone, is that one, it is important to decipher the substance of who someone is. And the term unbeliever is a bit tricky to define, because it's not one that I, from my own limited perspective, can say that person is and that person isn't. Because even within our denominations, we can be unbelievers, even within our own belief systems. So one. Number two, it is extremely important to have the guidance of God, especially in the subject of a relationship or marriage. And number three, I think what I was just describing about the journey is more about compatibility, that even within the same belief system, even when you are headed the same direction, you can be unequally yoked. You can have extremely different worldviews.
Thank you, Nomsa. You've summarized it so nicely, man. I like the last part where you indicate that being equally yoked, or equally yoked, also even touches the same denomination, or being unequally yoked, that is, touches the same denomination. We can be in the same denomination but unequally yoked. I liked that. But then I just want us to explore further. Then let's say then there are people who are, as we speak, that people who are in unequally yoked relationships and marriages. What are they supposed to do? That they're now, some have been in those relationships. They're approaching marriage. Others are in marriage and they have kids, things are happening. What happens in a state, in such a state? What should one do going forward? Brenda, what are your thoughts?
Whoa. If one is in an equally yoking relationship or an equally yoking marriage, now I necessarily wouldn't say my first piece of advice wouldn't be for them to leave, because I believe that relationships are work. Yeah, both are giving in to make this relationship work. That's one. Number two, I believe that this Christian journey is a growth journey. You're growing day by day. Yeah, you can't be stagnating at the very same point. And when I'm talking about growing, growing also entails sharing the light that God has given you. Growing also entails sharing the light. The more you share, the more you also learn, and the more you also grow. I think it's Nomsa who had pointed out, and it's something I also believe in, that truth has light in it, and if something is truth, if something can be considered as truth, then whoever sees it will see it and will identify it. It has light in it, and they will be attracted to it. So I'd say that if there are two unequally yoked persons, and because Christianity is a growth journey, surely there has to be someone preached to that who is considered dragging the other person behind, yeah, either by the life they live, or by sharing, actually, like taking time to actually teach, to actually share with this person. So in the case of a marriage, that would be a bit tricky. I really don't know how to answer that one. But in the case of a relationship, if truly you desire to have this person learn of the truth that you also know, or you desire to learn of the truth that they know, if that person is taking time out to share, if their lives are a beautiful sermon that can actually be followed, then it will automatically bring this other person to this truth. It will help them grow in their Christian walk. But if it is not, then it would mean that sadly, if it's not, then sadly it means that they may have to part ways. I don't know if I am clear, less.
Okay, I hear you. That if they are not in sync, they will have to part ways and stuff.
If by the sharing, if, like, you see, if we're talking about two unequally yoked persons, does this person who's stronger, for lack of a better word, do they desire to make this other weaker person grow to be where they are, to grow to get to where they are.
Let me come in. Sorry to cut you. Aren't you imposing where you are on this person? You be clear, you are unequally yoked, but now you want this person to come where you are and stuff. Aren't you imposing? Because I'm sitting here, I'm thinking on especially how we grow. We don't grow on this at the same pace.
At the same rate, yeah. We
don't grow at the same pace. So now when you say you teaching, it's like you want this person to come to you. And I don't know, because remember also Nomsa earlier on mentioned the fact that being unequally yoked does not only, we don't leave it at a spiritual level, it also goes to other aspects, you know, like the issue of finance and so are we not really imposing certain things to people so that they
not
can
really.
come
not really
while allow them to grow at their own pace? I don't know if I'm making sense.
You're making sense, but not really imposing. Here it's just looking like it's imposing because they're in a relationship. Would you say that if you are trying to share or teach your friend who is not in a relationship with you? Like, you see, if you're a practicing Christian, a very important aspect of this Christianity is sharing the light that God has given you to the other people. Yeah? You let this light that is in you shine to other people that they may see you and glorify your Father in heaven. So it's only looking like imposing just because it's now in a relationship, and possibly you're trying to make them change, maybe for other motives, perhaps maybe so that you can get married, so that people don't question. But you wouldn't say the same if it was just reaching out to another friend like that you are not.
Okay. Namsa, you had your hand, and there are comments on YouTube there. I want to just read them out as well as the people are commenting.
Sure. It's, you know, emotions.
Okay.
Emotions make things tricky. Okay. Emotions make things tricky. I think I will say that people, by and large, do not change for other people. They change for themselves. And that's a journey that they can only take with God, like God speaking to their conscience, and they change for themselves. So for me, in the context of I'll answer it two ways. In the context of a relationship, it's tricky to try and, you know, bring someone, when you're already in a relationship, it's tricky to try and bring someone along, you know, your journey when you'll never know whether that change is for you or it's truly a change of their own heart. And then 5 years down the line, someone tells you, no, me, this new belief thing, it's always been yours. I've just been doing it to please you. I think that's in the context of a relationship. But in the context of a marriage, I'll go back to what I was saying about grace, that grace is a very real thing, and marriage is 100% a God thing, because it's God originated and it is God ordained, whether it is two people of the same denomination, two people of different denominations. I've had friends marry people of other denominations, and I've attended their weddings because I believe that where marriage is and where two consenting adults are and marriage is, God is. Because it's like, I don't know what analogy to use, but marriage it's God originated and will always be God's domain. And grace is a very real thing within that context. I can't speak to what they should do if they find themselves in a marriage where they are unequally yoked. I can only say that God is there. I don't know what he will do. I know what he can do. I know what he has done for others. But God will always be there because that's his thing. It's like trying to take God out of life. God sustains life. It is his domain. So whether in the same denomination, whether across denominations, marriage will always be God's. Whether it looks right, and I'll add this caveat that where two consenting adults are, because there's different distorted views of marriage in the world. But where two consenting adults are and where marriage is, God will always be. And there's no limiting to what he can do, what he has, that we've seen what he has done for others. So yeah, I can't speak to what they should do, but all I can say is that God will always be there, and in marriage will always be God's. Nobody can take that away from him.
Okay. Okay. Okay, I hear you. Okay, Mbusi.
Okay, I think there's, thank you for your comments, guys. They're very insightful. But the Bible has given advice on what should happen where one person finds themselves married to an unbelieving spouse. So what happened during the days is, okay, it was assumed that you wouldn't marry someone who's an unbeliever. It would be unwise, right? And so there was another situation where you are both unbelievers, and then one person gets converted into the faith. And Paul wanted to address that issue, that what happens if we find ourselves married and then there is an unbelieving spouse. And in 1 Corinthians 7:15 says, but if the unbeliever leaves, let it be so. The brother or sister is not bound by circumstances. God has called us to live in peace. Okay? So you cannot leave. If you get in knowing that this person is an unbeliever, you most certainly can't leave. So I believe I think it's clear from the advice that's been given in those verses. Yeah.
Okay. So Namsa is saying, okay, I think Busi has answered that, but I just wanted to bring it home a bit. Has any one of you dated someone, inverted commas, unbeliever? And if you ended the relationship, why did you end the relationship? Has anyone, let me just see, has anyone dated someone who's an unbeliever? Okay, Nomsa is nodding her head. Nomsa, so why did you why did you end the relationship? Because I know that you're not married to that person. You're not married to that person. Why did you end the relationship?
Different worldviews. Different worldviews. Because what you believe, by and large, influences how you approach life. And the longer I stayed in the relationship, the more apparent it became to me that we have different worldviews and we approach life differently. And the things that matter to us are very different. For me, I grew up in an Adventist home. So Sabbath has always and will always be a sacred time for me. For that, for the other person, it wasn't. So, and then by and large, that influenced a lot of other things about the way we approached life. So the short answer is really different worldviews. Okay.
So yeah, I think it goes back to the introduction of the whole thing, that your values, your principles and stuff, they would form a basis of what it means to be unequally yoked. Okay, Mbusi, you want to share why you your relationship of unequally yoked?
I didn't end it because there was an equal yoking, but eventually, like all instances where you probably do not listen to sound advice, this difference in worldview presents so much mistakes and areas of conflict. It just generally unearths why a relationship wouldn't work, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it just happens. It's not that you are breaking it off saying you're an unbeliever, or you can even state it that we have differences in this and that and that. And because of everything that would have happened in the relationship, it becomes apparent that, you know what, we're just two different people. On my day of worship you are partying. And then when you are going on worship, let's say on Sunday or Saturday, whichever case it might be, I may be spending quality time with family, babysitting, doing other things which may be, according to my worldview, I consider them meaningful and nourishing to spend time with my family. And you know what that does? When automatically you have two different belief systems, especially when it comes to Christianity, it's clear that one of you will either be Muslim worshiping on Friday, going for prayers and other things. The other will be going on Saturday, the other will be going on Sunday. Your quality time is immediately cut because you can't see each other weekends, not for anything. Which then, for the relationship to thrive, it now has to work within 5 days of a week. And if both of you are working, you are in even more trouble. It now has to work after 8 o'clock till sunrise. And if you're staying with your parents, you won't need 6 months. It's just not going to work. So the differences in the values just presents those circumstances for a relationship to fail. Now, before this, I wanted to actually say something to say, we are not dating responsibly, or we're not getting into courtships responsibly. We see a person, like the appearances outside in terms of their beauty, personality, how they talk, and then we sort of like impute good character, and then we get in. And then when we get in, we then discover that me and this person have got different value systems. I have had people who I don't worship on the same day with, who I've tried to get to know, and it was clear on the answer that, okay, no, we're just trying to get to know each other. Everyone during the bargaining phase of getting to know each other asks the most critical questions. You know, those who are interested in security will say, what job do you have, etc. Those who are interested in religion will be going in on the spiritual issues to say, listen, but how do you feel about this and that, about monogamy? Which date do you worship at? I've had ladies ask me from the onset, like, so how is this going to work? Because they'll be saying that, okay, me, I'm on Sunday or Saturday, you are on the other side. And from that, when someone says that comment, they're telling me, you know what, I am committed to the day I go to church with. I go with my family and my grandparents. I'm not changing for anyone. I will be crazy. What will I tell my parents? That I'm changing, I'm going away. What am I saying about them and this church which has brought me up for 20-something plus years? When someone asks me that question, I already know that we are going to be friends. So most of us, we want to date and then ask the questions. During that bargaining phase, take those dates very seriously. It's not, you're not going for movies to spend time looking at the screen, holding each other's hands, or, you know, feeling this rush. You know, it's good to just have that infatuation at times. You want to go crazy. You want to feel someone. And we call it the vibe. Vibe is good, but vibe will not carry you through the night. It will not take the merit all the way till the end. It will not. So you get in there to ask serious questions, to find out the essence of someone, to vet these issues out. Because I've met people who I thought, okay, I think this person is generally, honestly, you said honestly mistaken, right? Yeah, honestly mistaken. And they say, but tell me something. Why is it that you guys don't do that? Don't do that. No, tell me, I'm interested in this. And I want you to just give me, you know, conjecture. Is it really there in the Bible? And then you show someone. And you feel like, oh, no, you know what? This thing is starting to bother someone. Like, listen, I want to talk about that issue. I feel like you showed me and everything and blah, blah, blah. I would like to talk about it some more. What does it mean? What decision then do I make? etc. If you find someone who is that malleable, that open to things, or let me say that open to actually learning things, you know, they will either follow the truth or they will cease to be honest, as we've already alluded to. So I want to say, this is like getting into a tunnel. And I honestly believe that people do not change for other people. In fact, it is very cruel to actually demand that from someone. It's very presumptive, and it's very arrogant to say, I have judged that I have the moral and spiritual high ground. You are going to come to church on my days. You're going to adopt these values. I feel like that actually kills, you know, the differences in personalities which you're supposed to enjoy from being with someone who's not identical to you. This level of growth only works if someone comes, if it comes to them at their own time and as God is guiding them. And honestly, you would rather not date until you are very much comfortable with that. You know what, these things can be resolved because the person is seemingly malleable. Simply put, it's like entering into two tunnels. You enter into two tunnels which are dark. The second you enter that tunnel, that person is in their character and in their system, you are in yours. You may go around trying to listen through the concrete wall to say, where are you moving? You are only hearing echoes from your tunnel because that is the voice that is in your head. If those tunnels were to be cut and open, you are never at the same point. You are never walking together. You are either miles ahead or miles behind because you're trying to be sympathetic in not pushing the other person too quickly. lest you lose them. You know, so you cannot change anyone. You would rather make a judgment from the beginning that, honestly speaking, I don't think I can do this. It's so significantly different. Our worldviews are so significantly different that we would collide most of the time. And if you find yourself in a relationship with someone where you are clearly incompatible, I don't know. You know, I actually, my biggest fear is marrying the wrong wife. Let me just put it out there. I feel like the way I am so knowledgeable of my emotions, as I'm walking down the altar, it would bother me to say, dude, you know you're making the biggest mistake of your life. I know that next week when we get home, when we move into our house together, these are the 5 issues. The fool sees trouble and avoids it. No, is it the fool? The wise man. The wise man sees trouble and avoids it. The fool just rushes straight into it. So I would say if you have glaringly evident and, you know, sticking out differences, you cannot go right ahead and say, you know what, I'm just going to dive in. Because it won't do itself inside if it can't do itself outside. Or if it can't solve itself. So I said, let's date responsibly. Some of us, we have to know that although there is an equal yoking, which we are trying to make equal in some of our relationships, they are not going anywhere. They are diverting us from purpose. They are sucking the life out of us. Duties and responsibilities which we are given at home or in the church are being compromised for the sake of being an emotional cushion to someone who you hope you want to butter their emotions, such that one day you can talk about a doctrinal issue and hope that they are going to adopt it. They will adopt it because you make them feel good. They're changing for you and to please you. If the change is not happening because it's genuinely planted by God, and someone just comes all of a sudden one day and tell you, listen, I've been thinking about this issue and I've decided to change. Someone who doesn't even care about worshiping with you and say, how about I come to your church this weekend and maybe next weekend you can come to my church. Someone who doesn't even want to spend time with you in the Lord and see the genuineness of your prayer and the genuineness of you loving, spending time in the Word. There is absolutely no way you are going to turn it around.
Wow. I think you've said a mouthful. I like what you're saying about dating responsibly and asking the relevant questions. There's some comments here. I think they are more or less inclined or in line to what you've been saying or what we've been saying. Makawa says equal yoking is much deeper and broader than just going to or attending the same church. I think we've touched on that. And then Nomsa says, for her, being equally yoked stretches to being equally yoked emotionally, spiritually, in terms of intellect, life experiences, habits, dreams, and life goals. And telling it with what you're saying about dating responsibly, when you say we must ask the relevant questions, such things, if you're going to know someone's intellect is when you're engaging them. If you're going to know about anyone's life experiences, it's when you're engaging them. So it's for you to get to a point of deciding whether you're going to be in the relationship with this person and whether you're going to be equally yoked and whatnot. We need to go deeper and understand where's this person coming from, their life experiences, their backgrounds and stuff. How do they think? Are we on the same page? Like we're saying, worldview and stuff. So it's really critical to have that in mind. I don't know if Abel has anything to say on this part, on this point.
No, I would say I think it has been exhausted.
Okay, so as we wrap up, guys, as we're going to wrap up, Nomsa touched on this a bit earlier on about how she's not going to say much about if she believes that marriage is God's institute, whether she's not going to tell the people who are married what to do if they are unequally yoked. But I just want to ask this question, guys. Do you think that God blesses unequally yoked marriages? Nomsa.
Yes. Yes, because
Why?
when it rains on the righteous man's land, it rains on the unrighteous man's land. Their crops all grow. Marriage for me is designed by God. And marriage, the way it's intended to be, is designed by God. It is two people saying, let's do life together. And because whether they are equally yoked, unequally yoked, two people coming together saying, you know what, I want to walk this life journey with you. I like the way you do life, and I think it gels with the way I do life. For me personally, when two people are coming together and saying, let's get married, that's essentially what they are saying. So whether they are equally yoked and unequally yoked, God blesses union in my perspective.
Okay. Namsa says God blesses marriage unions, either unequally yoked or equally yoked. What are your thoughts, Abel? I'm coming back to you.
Okay, thank you. I would like to give an illustration. It might sound like I'm digressing, but I hope I'll bring the point home. I wanted to use the example of King David, as well as Bathsheba and Solomon. If you might recall, King David took Uriah's wife, tried to deceive, and when it failed, he killed Uriah and took Bathsheba as his wife. The direct fruit of that adulterous relationship, God simply declared that the kid would die. Yes, David tried everything he could, but he fasted, he prayed about it, but it yielded nothing. But we then notice that David prays to God, seeks for forgiveness, confesses and repents, and God forgave him. Having been forgiven, you will notice that there came Solomon. David had so many sons. Having had so many sons, the funny part is, it's the child from that that relationship that started as adultery that became his successor, his heir, right? Solomon, as we might all know, became a great king, filled with wisdom, honor, fame, riches, you name it. But the point I wanted to make is, in as much as David and his descendants would then be blessed, there are consequences for what he had done, right? As you might recall, he was told that the sword would not depart from your house. And we know that his children started raping each other, Amnon raping Tamar. Absalom masterminds the death of Amnon. Absalom tries to make a coup, and he died in the process, right? And I'm sure you remember even the issue of Absalom sleeping with his father's wife on the roof with all of Israel watching. So in the end, in as much as there were blessings, the point I wanted to make is there are consequences for being unequally yoked. And in as much as blessings may come, what we need to be clear on is that there are always consequences for the choices that we make. Yes, for people who are already in such situations, I'm happy that was addressed. There isn't much that can be done. However, in 1 Peter 3, there's counsel that the conduct of the believer can then withdraw the unbelieving partner. So it's something that we could look from that angle. And as for a relationship, well, I would say for me, it's not a safe ground to tread on. To then say it will be blessed, well, the verse that Mose read from the onset is very clear. Do not be unequally yoked. to me, it's a clear command. It's not a suggestion. So if one then gets involved, blessings may come, but there will be consequences. I'll end here.
Okay. I think you're raising a very important point. So,
Can I ask a question?
yes, ma'am.
Just to understand what people believe. Is it possible to do marriage without God? And marriage the way God designed it to be, essentially the melding of two people, of two worldviews, of two life paths. Is it possible to do that without God?
That's a good question. Guys, that's a question there. Question there.
It's not
Thumbs up.
possible.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mbusi.
It's not possible because the entire Bible contains clauses which need to form up, or rather paragraphs which form up the marriage Bible. You know, for example, after marriage was there's a verse, so then shall a man leave his mother and father. Right there, you find us asking ourselves today, who's more important, your family or me? It's very clear your wife is important. But if you have a different value system, someone will think this mom gave birth to me, so she's important. She came before you. In fact, I'm here because of her. So you came second. You have your own mother. So you'll find there's many things in the Bible which say husbands love your wives, and then wives submit to your husbands. There's all those nuggets of wisdom which are given throughout the Bible, and they are what make marriage work. You know, it can seem like it works. Yeah.
Sorry, Mbusi. I think as much as we have this conversation has been inclined to the Christian aspect, but there are people who are not Christian who are married, and I'm not sure you also talking about that, Nomsa. So you're not only looking at the Christian perspective. There are people who are married who don't believe in God.
I don't know how to tackle it. I think, to be honest with you, you see, the issue is people may not believe in God, but they borrow things which are godly. For example, you cannot sustain a marriage without forgiveness when you're making mistakes every day. And I would say, at times, even the Bible says, when we do good things, we are filthy people generally, we're full of evil. And the Bible says it is God's Spirit which wills in you to do good according to his pleasure. So I want to make it clear, even when you're not married, when you bring a rose for your wife and everything, the Spirit of God, the Spirit of goodness is still somewhere there inside you. Because God is love. Okay? God is love. We are all built in the image of love. We tick better when we love each other as opposed to when we are in conflict. So, of course, it's if you believe in God, you will take the entire manual and read it, right? But some people who do not read it, they keep borrowing nuggets here and there. They have long and very difficult, hard to endure marriages simply because they do not take the easy way, which is stated in the manual. It will eventually get there. Like I said, unequal yoking or some of these challenges will eventually get you there. But you will find out you'll be dissatisfied for the first 15 years of your marriage until you really find out how it works.
Okay.
You know?
I hear you. Just wanted to wrap up, guys. We're out of time. I want to hear Brenda's thoughts on, does God bless the people who are unequally yoked, who are unequally yoked, and Mbusi did not answer it as well. Just brief. What are your thoughts on that, Brenda?
I think there's no situation that God cannot bless. There's no situation that God cannot work through. So, does God bless unequally yoked marriages? Yes, they also experience God's blessing. In those situations where there's unequally yoked, I still believe, even like what Nomsa said, when one person is blessed, the other also experiences the same blessing. So yes, God does bless unequally yoked marriages, and it's not to say that that, then they're smoothly flowing. Just like any other marriage, they'd have their own challenges, but even through that, they would still experience God's blessings. That's my thought.
Okay. Mbusi.
Yes, God blesses them, unless, according to Abel, we foolishly get into them. God cannot bless something as strictly forbidden. He may give us the grace to turn around our mistakes, but it to be grace in the midst of our consequences.
Okay. We're out of time, guys. I feel like there's a lot to talk about regarding this topic, and which we did not really expand as much. You know, what Nomsa earlier on highlighted about that it's not only about the spiritual aspect, but it goes, you know, on the general aspects. And I don't think we really did justice to that part. But we'll have the conversation as we move with these conversations. At this moment, I just want to thank everyone who joined us wherever they are and took that time out to come and be part of this conversation. We really, really appreciate your time. Yes, and also I want to thank our lovely guests. They took time out. Others, they are ahead with an hour, you know, and they make sure that they will be with us and be part of this conversation. Thank you so much, Nomsa. Thank you so much, Abel. Thank you so much, Brenda. And thank you so much, Mbusi. We're going to call it a night, and we'll meet. We'll just check our social media platforms on when is the next episode. And please, guys, do the right thing. Follow us on Instagram, like on Facebook, and also follow and subscribe on YouTube. Have a good